I bet that many of you watching on live stream or here today have seen Anna's beautiful art, some of which you can see on the screen. With her husband, Nathan, they founded Rifle Paper Company in 2009, and they used income they earned from designing other people's wedding invitations. And from that, they ran a bunch of products, and they launched with an e-commerce site. I do know, anecdotally, she told me they ran the business for a year without a company credit card. Oh, 5 years. 5 years.
Yeah, we had a debit card. Yeah. And we thought we should get points.
Talk about putting one foot forward after the other. And before that, Nathan was a musician in a band, and and Anna was a freelance illustrator, graphic designer. So he was touring, she was making the posters. They got married, and they decided to bootstrap their young marriage into a company. And the company has now grown to an international brand that is carried in 6,000 stores. I have seen it in Barnes & Noble. I've seen it in the Paper Source here. You're in Target as well, is that right? Yeah. And they design greeting cards, stationery, accessories for gifts and home, from cards to wallpaper. I think they also have rugs now. Yep. And the brand, which we're going to hear about her story and about the vision behind the brand, but the brand is built around their artistic and aesthetic vision, and the mission is really to create moments of unexpected beauty in the real world. They have 100 employees across their main studio and flagship store, which is in Winter Park outside of Orlando, and their warehouse in Maitland, Florida, and their New York City office. I have to say, Anna is a Jersey girl. She is from North Jersey, and she's currently the primary artist of the brand, and her title is Chief Creative Officer. Nathan, her husband, was the CEO of Rifle Paper Company until 2021, and he now serves on the board, and I believe he is joining us via live stream with their 4 beautiful children. So thank you so much for being here today, and Anna, I'm proud to have Anna as a friend and as a board member of Scala Foundation, so thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I think first, Anna, I want to give you a chance to just tell us a little bit about your vision for the brand, and you brought some photographs. So if you want to share with us the images that you brought and tell us a little bit about Rifle Paper Company and the brand, and then I have some questions for you.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much. This has been amazing today, and I've loved hearing from Jonathan and Aiden and everybody, so appreciate having me in the mix. The non-liturgical artist in the room. But yeah, we started, like Margarita said, it was kind of, we had some idea of what we wanted to do, but it also just sort of happened as it unrolled. And the brand is really based on my artwork, which is all hand-painted with gouache, which is like an opaque watercolor. So you can see on the screen that it's sort of very flat and colorful. And the 2 pictures on the right are a pattern made out of the art on the left. So often I'll paint in a way that will allow me to create a pattern better later on the computer, sort of strategically. So a lot of my original art doesn't look that beautiful, and it's sort of all in pieces and really intended for the final use of what we're going to make. But really the artwork is really the heart of the brand, so that's why we're on kind of a wide range of products, from cards to shoes to rugs, but it's really that aesthetic that I think people are drawn to in the color palette. So that's really the core of the brand. And I think over the years, the number one comment that I've heard from people is that it just makes them happy, and it is very colorful and light. And I think it took me a long time to realize that that very simple purpose is really important, so that it really is, especially after today, maybe sort of entry point of beauty for people rather than something later on. So,
did you have more images to show, or on the screen? Okay. Yeah. Go ahead and please walk us through the images of your work. I love when I have artists come to my class, which I now do. People love hearing about the artist process. So thank you for preparing.
Yeah, I only have 3. But the second one here, so this is We have sort of a best-selling print. It's called Garden Party. The image on the left is one of these 3 clusters that I painted, and it's really on almost every product that we make. I think the next slide shows a bunch. But the collaboration on the right was sort of a random collaboration that we did. Venus Razors reached out, and at first it was sort of odd. Why would we partner with a razor company? But it's been very successful. It's at Target. And I think that it really showcases that beauty in the everyday. Taking a very sort of mundane task or object that's just really a useful tool and turning it into something that's beautiful. So I think that it kind of really encapsulates the brand in many ways, and that we're not really, there's a lot of purpose and intention for everything that we do, but it's also not designed to be out of reach. It's really meant for everybody and to be accessible. So that's just something that I like about that collaboration. And this is probably hard to see, but this is kind of a smattering of lots of products with that same print that was made out of 3 illustrations. So you'll see it in different colorways, which we manipulate with my creative team on the computer. We sort of adjust, play around with things, and then put it on. That print is pretty much on everything that we make. And if it's not on something, we make sure that we add it, because it's usually the best seller. But that just sort of gives you an idea of how the artwork is really a jumping off point for creating so many things out of it.
Well, okay, so could you tell us a little bit more, Anna? What are you trying to convey or share through your art? How do you know? I mean, sometimes people might think, well, the purpose is to just sell a lot of art, so you have to just give the customer what they want. How can I make the most money? How do I manipulate this so people are going to want it more? I mean, or do you start with the vision, as you said, and try to pull out a vision? And what are you trying to convey or show through your art? Is it driven by business considerations, by the customer, by your own vision, all of that?
I would say all of it, probably in different hierarchy. I think that the vision definitely comes first in protecting what we think is really beautiful. And because we're products, there's so many other factors that are coming into play. It's not just the art, it's the object itself. So if we're making a pen, the pen has to write well, or the pencil has to work. And so sometimes creating the art is the easiest part, but the manufacturing or sort of how to do that at scale can be really challenging and becomes part of the creative process. So picking materials, picking who can create it, working with the factory, that all becomes part of the creative process. And then I think, of course, at the end of the day, the customer is part of the process. So if at the end of the day it doesn't sell, for what I do, I don't consider that necessarily a success. It doesn't have to be the best seller, but we might include products that we know aren't going to resonate as well, but we think might add a storytelling element to the brand. But there is a sense of how people react and how if people want to buy it and if they're responding to it is definitely a measure of its success.
Okay, I want to draw this out a little bit, because sometimes people think that art and business are fundamentally different kinds of activities. One is creative and one is exploitative. But I just heard you say that actually bringing a product to market is itself part of the creative process, right? So it's one thing to conceive of a beautiful thing. It's a different thing to make something beautiful that also has a function, like a razor or a pen or these everyday objects. And it's another thing to scale that, to find the factory, to find the distribution channels, and to get the product in an affordable, functional, beautiful way to people. So are art and business both fundamentally creative processes? Can you tell us a little bit about being an artistic entrepreneur?
I don't think for me, they don't feel different. I'm very inspired by the business side of what we do. And even though Nathan and I as partners, he had a heavier hand in the business side, we've always approached it together, and he's very creative. We both share a lot of those things together, where he can see the artistic process and I can see the business side with him. But I think that, yeah, how we do those things is just as creative. And making something quality and beautiful and, like you said, affordable, which is really challenging. And it puts a lot of constraints on what we can do. And so figuring out how to do that in a way that brings it really at the end of the day to as many people as possible, I think is a creative challenge that I find very inspiring. And I'm so used to thinking in that way at this point. I would love to do art for art, but it's not really what I'm creating for, as you saw, even in the how I paint. You know, it's very much taking all those things into consideration about the whole process. It's not sort of creating this, sometimes it looks good on its own, but really it's for what the end goal is. And because we're everyday products, you know, all those things coming together is what makes it work. And that, as you're saying, like beauty as a whole, it's sort of, when all those things work together is when it works the best.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that, yes, your goal is to make things that are beautiful, but as an artist who's also an entrepreneur, you're looking at the whole process. So what counts maybe as success for you as an artist is the whole process, is the look of the object, how well it works, how you distribute it, and making it affordable, making it accessible. And that, what I hear you saying is that there's a beauty in that wholeness of the entrepreneurial process. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, and I even think, you know, then behind the scenes, there's probably another layer of just how we run our business and how we've always really, I think Nathan and I's values probably come through in the way that we run our business and how we've cared about quality and just making sure people have a good experience with the products, customer service, how we interact with people, how we treat them as customers. All of that comes into play and really is a factor for people if they're deciding if they had a good experience with the product. It's all part of it. So if you buy something beautiful but you had terrible customer service, it's not going to be a great experience. So it all has to be there.
Can you say a little bit more about the values driving your entrepreneurship? You spoke just now about customer service, and how is it that the values that you and Nathan have influenced your understanding of running the business?
I think in the beginning, I don't know that we really talked about it. I think we did kind of come in, we have similar backgrounds. We come from evangelical backgrounds. We're now Catholic converts, so probably behind the scenes, there's a lot of things going on as well outside of the business. But, you know, we really care about just making something good and providing something good for people. So I think that comes through in a lot of, hopefully, not that we've been perfect, but how we treat our employees and how we treat our customers, and, you know, making things right. How we interact with our accounts, being a good customer, being somebody that people want to work with. All those things are incredibly important behind the scenes, because you might get an opportunity, but if people don't like working with you, you're not going to get a second one. So it just, all that really has been part of, I think, our story and behind the scenes, what's helped us grow.
You know, just this last week, I taught an article on vocation and teaching, and there's so much emphasis on the impact teachers have on students, but there's not as much research on the growth of a teacher because you're teaching. And I think oftentimes with business, we think about, okay, what are the values that influence this business person, or how does your faith influence your business? I kind of wonder, when you said there's a lot going on in the background, you come from an evangelical background, you journeyed into Catholicism not actually too long ago, you're raising 4 kids. What about the opposite side? I mean, does facing the challenges as a businesswoman and as a married couple doing business together, does facing the challenges of business actually have an impact on how you think about your faith?
Yeah, I think, everything is sort of interwoven for us. I mean, like, how we work together as business partners translates to how we are as parents together, and working together as business partners helped us work together as parents. We had that foundation. We had already gone through a lot of, like, communication issues, how to balance each other out. And yeah, I think that maybe that process behind the scenes has always helped us have the right priorities, that we, make sure that, like, yes, business is important, but our family is first. And just making sure that our perspective is right as we've grown, or as the pressures might get harder, or as the company's grown, there's more people involved, there's a lot going on. But I think that it's really, behind the scenes, grounded us in something more important.
Wow, that's beautiful. So, this wasn't on our pre-prepared questions, but maybe you have an answer for this. In terms of the everyday beauty and the bright use of colors, as I mentioned earlier today, there was a time in my teaching career where I realized I was wearing all black and white and gray. And, as a professional woman in my 30s, I don't think I had any color in my life. And one day I went out and I got a pink manicure. And I stared at my pink nails. I was never quite the legally blonde girl, even when I was a young girl. I had 3 older brothers. I wore hand-me-downs that were men's clothing. It was fine. I was happy. But it wasn't really until this point in my career where I started to question beauty, where I thought, why does my personal life, why do my personal belongings lack color? And somehow when I started to just have little spots of color, a blue notepad, a green pen, I didn't put pink streaks in my hair, but you see people doing this. Suddenly I was living in color again. And when I look at your products, I think, wow, this is a way to bring color and to bring brightness. And so why did I, as a professional woman, think I couldn't have color? Because, I thought it was too feminine. And if color's feminine, then that's going to make me look like I'm not, like there's no authority. That was probably just in my head, but I think some women feel that way. The first time I walked into an academic meeting and it was all men and I was wearing pink and a jangling belt or something, I kind of wanted to go crawl in the back of the room. And then, my first meeting in New York at a foundation and it's all gray suits. And again, I have cobalt blue on or something. But I discovered after a while that actually people liked it if I just wore color that was balanced and whole, right? Not kind of shocking people with my color, but that there was a way to be feminine and have color that's not shocking but appropriate and brightens up a room, and that actually in the professional setting it worked just fine. But as a woman, I didn't know where to go to think about that. So that's a long-winded question, but just why is it important to have color in our life?
That's a good question. Well, it's funny because I don't always, for a while I didn't have much color in my house, which I think was maybe partly that I was living in this world of color at work and needed to come home to something a little more peaceful. And yeah, I think that our color palette is a big part of the brand. And I think the use of color is very fascinating and definitely evokes different emotions. And what we're doing is sort of these everyday objects, like the mission statements, beauty in the everyday. And it's not meant to, we're not really creating our brand that you're going to buy wallpaper and a rug and your whole, you could, but it'd be a little intense, your whole room rifle. But it's sort of designed to be this, okay, maybe it's just a pen on your desk that brightens your day. Or it could be something small. It doesn't have to be overpowering, just something that when you look at it, you feel a bit of joy, or like the razor, maybe, you're sort of makes you happy to see it. And so it doesn't have to be necessarily overpowering, color everywhere, but I think, finding those moments that sort of speak to you or find places that bring joy are I think, important to sort of break up the mundane, or just sort of take you out of a moment of taking you out of the mindset that you're in and seeing something that sort of brings you above that.
Beautiful. That kind of beauty, that everyday beauty calls you out a little bit, calls to you. But you're also talking, I think, about harmony when you say that it's not like you have to have your whole room decorated with everything rifle paper company, because then you would lose the harmony, right? So it's harmony, and it's something that's giving you joy in the moment and sort of pulling you out. Another question that maybe is also a little, personal, but I also am married to an artist and work with my husband. Scala's artist in residence, in the literal sense of the term, is David Clayton, my husband. And on the Saturday afternoons, I go watch college football, and he paints. And one day he made a beautiful painting. And then I went out the next Saturday, and he had painted over it. And I wasn't very happy, because I liked the painting. And he said he wanted to make it even better. And by the end, it was great. But I will say that, being married to an artist, I see that there is this kind of, this creativity, this imagination, this vision that comes first. And so I think one question I have for you is, well, David made something that I thought was good, and he thought it wasn't, and I guess, he gets to keep going because it's his painting. But as an artist, what I learned from that experience is that an artist doesn't want to look at their work if it's not good. So can you tell us of a time when you made something and you thought, scratch this, start over, nope, starting again? And how do you know when you make something and it's not good?
It happens like weekly, yeah. More often than the good stuff showing up, probably. But I think that, sometimes you see something in your head, you create it, and it's just not working. I think you just know. It's hard to explain. Although sometimes there's times you know that it's not good, and you just edit yourself. There's times when you think it's good, and I use Nathan a lot because he really understands the brand. He's a musician, he has a good eye. And so there's times I'm unsure, and I'll ask for his opinion, kind of based on what he says. I'll formulate my opinion still, but it'll help me kind of, gauge the reaction. There's things I know, I don't have to ask anybody to know it's good. You just sort of feel confident about it. And then there's things you get wrong, products that I might have really thought were going to resonate with people that just didn't. And it's not always, for us, it's not always the art itself. It might be what it was for. So maybe that pattern didn't work on a rug, but it would work on a card. And sort of figuring out why it didn't work is very fascinating to me. Like, I love being in meetings where we're talking about rankings of our sellers, what people are responding to. It's really interesting for me to try to figure out what it is. And sometimes I think people make conclusions that I don't necessarily agree with. Like, you do something with a black background, doesn't sell. Somebody would be like, it was a black background. We can't make anything with a black background ever again. And you're like, well, it wasn't the black background. I think it was this. And so I think you have to really pick apart what it is and look at the things that are working and ask why. And so it becomes this sort of puzzle piece of, taking things that work or don't and trying them on different things. So it's a lot of that. It's a lot of trial and error. But there are those things that you just know aren't good. And you gotta cut it out, edit yourself.
Every week you design things and you say,
I mean, every week I edit things, sometimes for my team, sometimes for myself. But yeah, just making sure that it not only meets a standard of what I think is good, just maybe more objectively, but there's other filters too, which is something I try to teach my team is because of the business we're in, there's so many factors that you have to consider. So we might think it's beautiful, but it might not work for this reason. Or it might have too many things that are pink, and so you can't do another pink one. So there's just a lot of factors that come into play with designing a collection that have to be looked at in more of a big picture way.
And it sounds like from what you're describing, it's you are the lead designer, but other people are involved in giving you feedback. Your team members, you're looking at the sales figures, and you're looking at sales figures by design, and you're taking that back. And so you actually have to receive all this feedback on your art all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah? Wow.
Yeah, it's become, I think over the years it started very personal. It was me, it was my art. I wasn't really thinking about anybody else. And at this point, it's not a bad thing. I don't see it that way, but I'm designing for the brand as well. And so I went through moments where maybe I wanted to try something different stylistically, and it just wasn't right for the brand. And I had to see that. And now, I'm putting the filter on just like I'm trying to get my designers to. It's not just me. Like, even though it came from me, and even though I do a lot of the art, I'm still designing for the brand and for under these parameters that I have to give myself. So a lot of times when something's not working, it's sort of me also editing myself in that way. Even if I maybe think it's good, I'm seeing it's not sort of meeting those filters. So, yeah, it's just, for me, it's a challenge. I like that part of it, and it doesn't really hinder the creativity. But
Well, I think it's so important to hear from you, Anna, because a question that kept coming up was, well, what do we do about art in the secular realm? Like, we've talked about liturgical arts, we've talked about church art, we've talked about sacred images, but your work is art in the secular realm. And what I hear you describing is using the language of, this is an offering, right? You are gathering, you are using materials, you're using color, and you're co-creating something, but then you're offering that back to the public, and you're listening to see, okay, is this having the response that I wanted? So I think a lot of the questions have come back to this motivation for you as an artist. It's not about you, it's about gathering together elements and offering something that you think ennobles and uplifts, and you're listening for the signals about that.
yeah, and I think that for me, that feedback of it makes me happy is a signal that I'm doing something that is good, in the sense of like maybe good truth and beauty, that there's something that that's bringing people joy, and I think that that's a inherently good thing. And so that to me is a marker of, it's like I said, maybe more of an entry point for people of just seeing something beautiful that's not deconstructed or meant to be ugly or shocking or satirical. It's really meant to be very approachable and good and happy, and it's pretty simple. And I was saying at lunch today, keeping that simplicity is actually now one of the harder things, because I think the tendency is to try to overcomplicate things. So just making sure that very simple mission is what we're focused on, I think is really important, because the more you complicate it, I think the more you lose that.
Well, I think one other carryover theme from the last panel is that artists need to have supportive spouses. And there are a lot of people who have emailed me before they came here today that they're here with their spouse. So it's wonderful to have, a couple that has started a business and has worked together. I can say, knowing your husband, that your husband has a wonderful love of music and a great sense of humor. And I can also say that my husband also loves music and has a great sense of humor and is a wonderful artist. So in terms of being supportive, I also just think that there's a joyful creativity that is fostered in the home that can be generative, and I see that when I see you and Nathan. And I just wonder if you have any advice for people who are partnering with their spouse.
Well, it's a big one. Probably depends on your spouse. But we started working together kind of when we were dating. He was in a band, I was doing show posters, so it was a very small way, but, working the merch table, things like that. And so I think it was always in our relationship to sort of share that creativity and work with each other in some way. And then we started the business a year after we got married, so it's kind of all we've known. I think it would be harder to go into it later. But still, we had to navigate a lot of things throughout that. Just sort of how to communicate, how to separate personal from business, how not to take personal into the office, when to talk about work. But, we found our groove, and we have different strengths and sort of play into them. He's very extroverted, I'm introverted. We have different roles in the office. So I think that it really worked. And then we shared the same vision and those core values, like I said, the quality, the product first, all of those things we really shared. So that helped really bring us together. So I think you really, whether it's a spouse or a business partner, like that shared vision is just really key, and a good balance of personalities and roles, and very clear, you and for your employees, because if it's not working between you guys, it's not ideal for an employee to be around it. So I think just making sure that you sort of have that professionalism in the office, and just really clear, communication in general, important.
Well, thank you so much, Anna. Nathan was here with you last year, and if I'm not mistaken, his role today is babysitting the 4 kids. Is that right? And your youngest is 9 months, 7 months?
No, almost 6 months.
6 months. Wow. So, Nathan, we miss you. Thank you for allowing Anna to be here. Thank you for supporting her. Anna, thank you so much for the beautiful creations you have. Thank you for being with us. We are going to take a brief break and then come back for a closing panel. But wonderful to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.